AI in the classroom,
Yeah.
it's everywhere you turn these days.
There really is.
Everyone's talking about personalized AI tutors, Like, imagine if every student could have this incredible resource to help them learn, really grasp these complex topics.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing, right?
It does have a lot of potential.
There's this whole other side to it.
There is.
People are worried, right? What if students just use AI to cheat?
Right.
To avoid actually learning the material?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How do we make sure it doesn't become just a shortcut?
Exactly. And that's what makes this new research paper so fascinating. It really digs into this whole issue of using ChatGPT. It's like the poster child for AI right now.
Right.
To learn how to code.
And what I find particularly interesting about this paper is how it gets to the heart of the matter. It's not just theoretical, They combined real data from actual university coding courses with controlled experiments.
Oh, wow. So they're looking at how this is playing out
Exactly.
in the real world.
In real classrooms, which gives us a much more realistic view of how ChatGPT is being used and what it means for students.
That's great because our listeners are smart. They want to cut through all the hype.
Absolutely.
See what's really going on. And this research gives us that.
It does.
Now, I know some of you might be thinking, hold on, what exactly are we talking about with these LLMs and this ChatGPT everyone keeps mentioning? And how does all of this connect to learning something like coding?
Right. It can seem a bit like its own language sometimes, all this AI jargon.
It really can.
But at their core, LLMs, or large language models, are basically really, really smart chatbots. Think of them as having access to this massive amount of data, and they've learned to understand and generate text that sounds incredibly human-like. They can translate languages, write different kinds of creative content, and yes, even help you figure out coding problems.
And ChatGPT is one of those famous examples of this.
Exactly. That's the one everyone's talking about these days.
It is. And for this research, they were specifically looking at how people use ChatGPT to learn Python.
Python is a great choice because it's used in so many different areas, web development, data science, you name it. So these findings are really relevant for anyone interested in coding these days.
Exactly. It's a great place to start. So one thing that really stood out to me in this paper was how students are already using ChatGPT in their coding journey. It's not some futuristic thing. It's happening right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's already happening.
Like they gave this example of a student who was really struggling with a particular coding concept.
Okay.
And instead of just asking ChatGPT for the answer,
Right.
Just give me the solution, they used it to ask for a better explanation of the concept.
Interesting. So they were using it more as a learning tool than a crutch.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's like having this 24/7 coding tutor right there with you, ready to answer your questions and give you feedback whenever you need it.
That's a great way to put it. And the research actually found that this kind of conversational learning approach, where students are actively engaging with ChatGPT, asking questions, seeking clarification, is actually linked to positive learning outcomes. Students who used ChatGPT this way tended to perform better on tests and assignments.
So it's not just about getting the right answer. It's about understanding the why behind it.
Exactly. And that active engagement is key.
Okay, so using ChatGPT as a learning companion, asking questions, seeking explanations, all good things. But I'm guessing there's a but coming.
Well, like with any tool, and especially one as powerful as AI, there are potential downsides we need to be aware of.
So ChatGPT can be this super useful learning companion, giving you explanations and feedback when you need it. But I'm sure there's a downside. I mean, if you can get answers instantly, doesn't that make it tempting to rely on it too much?
Oh, absolutely. And that's actually one of the things they looked at in this research, how the ability to copy and paste answers from ChatGPT affected how people used it.
Oh, that's interesting because it seems like such a small thing.
It does, but you'd be surprised. When they made it so people couldn't just copy and paste the answers, they actually used ChatGPT less overall. And when they did use it, they were more likely to ask for explanations than straight up solutions.
Right, because if you have to actually type out the code yourself, it forces you to think about it more.
Exactly. You're not just blindly copying and pasting. You're engaging with the material more actively. But here's the thing. When they allowed copy and paste ChatGPT usage went way up, which makes sense, right? It's just easier.
Sure.
But people became way more reliant on just getting those ready-made solutions instead of figuring things out themselves.
Like anything in life, right?
Yeah.
If you always take the easy way out, you never really learn and grow.
Precisely. And in the context of learning to code, that can be a real problem because coding is all about problem solving.
It's not enough to just know the answers. You have to understand the how and the why behind them.
Exactly. And this over-reliance on AI-generated solutions is where the research really starts to raise some red flags because while it might seem like you're making progress getting those quick wins, you could be missing out on building that foundational knowledge.
All right, so you might be able to get away with it in the short term.
Me.
But in the long run, when you encounter a new problem you've never seen before, you won't have the skills to solve it on your own.
Exactly. It's like the difference between memorizing a formula and actually understanding how it works. If you just memorize it, you're not going to be able to adapt and apply that knowledge to new situations.
So it seems like the real challenge here is finding that balance. AI can be a powerful tool for learning, but we have to be careful not to let it do all the thinking for us.
Absolutely. We need to be mindful of how we're using these tools and make sure we're still actively engaged in the learning process. And that actually leads into another fascinating finding from this research. It turns out that not everyone is equally susceptible to falling into this trap of over-relying on AI. The researchers found some interesting differences depending on people's prior experience with coding.
So it sounds like there are some real risks here, especially when it comes to over-reliance. Did the research say anything about who might be most vulnerable to that?
They did, actually, and this is where things get really interesting. It turns out that complete beginners, people with little or no coding experience, they actually saw some of the biggest benefits from using ChatGPT.
Really? That's surprising. You would think it would be the other way around.
You would, wouldn't you? But it makes sense when you think about it. When you're just starting out, everything is new, right? There's this steep learning curve.
Absolutely.
ChatGPT can make that a lot less intimidating. It can explain things in a way that makes sense to you, give you instant feedback on your code, basically just lower the barrier to entry.
So it levels the playing field a bit, gives those newcomers a leg up.
Exactly. But, and this is a big but, those same beginners who benefited the most initially were also the most likely to become overly reliant on ChatGPT in the long run.
Ah, I see. So it's that initial ease of use, that quick sense of accomplishment that can be so alluring.
Precisely. And that actually ties into another fascinating finding from this research. This idea of the illusion of learning.
The illusion of learning. Okay, now you've got my attention. What's that all about?
So they found that people who used ChatGPT often thought they were learning more than they actually were. Their perceived understanding was higher than their actual performance.
So they're mistaking familiarity with the tool for actual mastery of the concepts.
Exactly. And that can be a real problem, especially in a field like coding, where continuous learning is so important.
Right, because you might feel confident going into a job interview, for example, but then when you're asked to actually solve a problem on your own, you're lost.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be aware of this potential pitfall. AI can be a fantastic tool for learning, but it's just that. A tool. It's not a replacement for putting in the effort to really understand the concepts.
So where does that leave us then? Should we be embracing AI in education, or should we be approaching it with a healthy dose of caution?
I think it's more nuanced than a simple yes or no. AI is here to stay. It's only going to become more integrated into our lives, including education. The key is to use it thoughtfully, to harness its potential while being mindful of the risks.
So maybe instead of asking, will AI replace teachers, we should be asking, how can we use AI to become better learners?
Exactly. That's the real question. How can we use these powerful tools to enhance our own abilities, not replace them?
It's a crucial question, and one that I think we're all going to be grappling with in the years to come. Well, I think this has given our listeners a lot to chew on.
I hope so. It's a fascinating area of research, and there's still so much to learn.
Isn't there always? That's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
It certainly does.
Thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure picking your brain.
The pleasure was all mine. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, as always, thanks for tuning in, and keep those minds curious.